Here's a nice rational equation. If it's a rational equation, so it means if there's fractions and there's an equal sign, has to have those two things, then you can use something called clear fractions, or I typically like to call it the I hate fractions rule. And what you need to do is factor all the denominators and then multiply every term by the lowest common denominator. So let's start with that. Let's factor the things. Now y minus 5 you can't do anything with, so we'll just leave. Y can't do anything with, I'll just leave. 13y plus 5. But then y squared minus 25, I can factor that as it's a difference of squares. Now, to find my lowest common denominator, it needs to include each factor the most number of times it occurs in any one factorization. In other words, I have to have everything represented. So what I do is I just pick one, and let's say I'll pick this one. So I need to have a y minus 5 and a y plus 5. Then I look here, and I already have a y minus 5, so I don't need to include that anymore. But this one just has a single y, and that's different than a y minus 5. So this is something new I need to include in my lowest common denominator. So that's my lowest common denominator. Again, you have to factor all the denominators to make sure that you get the lowest common denominator. Okay, then, if it's a rational equation, then you can multiply every term by that lowest common denominator. So I'm not changing the denominators to be this. I'm just multiplying every term by that. So let me show you. You've got 10 over y minus 5 minus, notice I'm giving myself lots of room there, equals 13y plus 5 over y minus 5y plus 5. Now notice I didn't change any of those denominators. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply every term by this lowest common denominator. So a y minus 5, y plus 5. This one gets a y minus 5, y plus 5. And this one gets a y minus 5, y plus 5. And these are all over 1. So when I'm multiplying, I'm just multiplying the numerators when I get to that point. Okay, so now I can cancel. So this first term, I have a y minus 5 on the bottom, and there's a y minus 5 on the top. So what I'm left with this whole first term is a y plus 5, and a 10. Usually we write the number first, so it's a 10, and then we'll write the y, and then I have a y plus 5. Notice no denominator, gone. Next term, the y's cancel out, and so I'd be left with a y minus 5, y plus 5, and a 2. Let's write the 2 first, so it'll be a minus 2, and then y minus 5, y plus 5. Equals, this one, the y minus 5's go, so do the y plus 5's. So I'm just left with y times 13y plus 5. Okay, now I have an equation with no fractions that I can solve. Let me get rid of the brackets first, maybe. So I'll multiply this through 10y squared. Oh, it's a quadratic. So I need to bring in my quadratic game in order to solve this. Plus 50y. This one here, I've got a bunch of things to multiply. I'm just going to FOIL that together first, leave the minus 2 out front, and then it'll be y times y is y squared, positive 5y minus 5y, which will cancel, and then a minus 25 equals 13y squared plus 5y. Okay, I'll leave this first stuff alone, and then I'll distribute this, so it'll be a minus 2y squared and a positive 50 equals 13y squared plus 5y. Now, since it's a quadratic, I'm going to bring everything over to one side. Now, when I'm looking at it, I've got a 10y squared and a 2y squared and then a 13. I think that I'll bring everything over to the right side because it'll make it positive on the right side. Doesn't matter too much, but I'm going to bring the the stuff to the left side or the right side. So I'm going to subtract 10y squared here and add 2y squared. Those will cancel. So on this side I have to subtract 10y squared and add 2y squared. Okay, so those cancel. Then my y. Let me write down what I have so far. So 50y plus 50 equals 13 minus 10 is 3 plus 2 would be 5 y squared plus 5y. Okay, bringing everything to the right, I'll subtract 50y, subtract 50y, and I'll subtract 50 and subtract 50. So I get 0 is equal to 5y squared minus 45y minus 50. Quadratic. Now they're all divisible by 5, so let's do that. Let's divide everything by 5.
I'll just stick around here. That'd be amazing.
So 0 divided 5 is still 0. This would be y squared minus 9y minus 10. Oh, am I done yet? Okay, it's a quadratic, so I can factor it. So I have a y and a y. I think it'll be a minus 10 and a plus 1 equals 0. So now I have y plus 1 equals 0, or y minus 10 equals 0. So I'll say y is equal to a negative 1, or y is equal to a 10. Now let me go back and look at the original question, which is way up there. Okay, there we go. And what I need to do is check to see if those will work. And really what I'm checking, you can check the whole thing, plug it in for y and solve each side. But what I'm checking is on the denominator of the original question up here, I can't have a 0. So if I plug a negative 1 in here, or there, or there, or there, I can't get a 0. And I don't. So I would say negative 1 is an answer. And then by plugging in a 10 in, you don't get 0 either. And so I would say both those answers would be correct. All right, hopefully that helps you. That's quite a long question. Sorry about my office mates yelling in the background, but all right, hopefully that helps.